Hello watch enthusiasts. Now I often receive emails asking about recommendations for affordable timepieces which have an iconic design or status. And I can certainly understand this because in a world of so many products being produced by brands, it is great to be able to see models which are enduring and have a design or a design characteristic which really is fascinating to the owner. And so as a result, today I'd like to produce a video about what I would consider the best iconic timepieces with their iconic designs for under £1,000. However, before I begin the video, I would like to encourage you all to join the Watch Guys, which is my group on Snups, the social media platform for sharing pictures of your interests and collections, and where you can ask me and other members any questions, which I'll do my utmost to reply to personally. And as today's featured piece of writing, or indeed a picture, I'd like to congratulate Mike O'Connor on his new Omega Seamaster 300, which is a fantastic watch, and I must say any of the generations from the early models, as is Mr. O'Connor's, to mine, which is the more recent ceramic version. These are brilliantly designed watches and truly superb to own, so I certainly congratulate you on owning one of these. And so I would encourage you all to follow the link down below and join the group to be able to enjoy these features and really get the most out of the channel. The first watch I'd like to talk about is the Seiko Turtle, and these are the SRP 777s and 775s, and there are various other reference numbers for different colourings now, but those are the bases. And this is a watch which, in my eyes, has become the most iconic of Seiko divers, for the simple reason that this watch is based on a model from the 1970s and 80s, in fact various models from the 70s and 80s, in this turtle style of case, with this large cushion case. And these have become very famous because they've been seen on the wrists of, for example, members of the cast of Apocalypse Now, and have as a result been associated with this rugged dependability that Seiko are so known for. And the design of this watch is absolutely textbook Seiko dive watch, because with that cushion case which features the very typical curvature and polishing seen on Seiko watches with brush tops to the lugs, and then a continued polishing on the sides, we also see that 4 o'clock crown, which has become a real calling card of these watches. Additionally, the hands are carried over from the SKX in their design, with these wonderful types of sharpened and cornered arrows, with this smaller hour hand as well, which recedes into the dial when you don't want to see it, and yet is very legible when you do, due to the luminescence of it. And of course, Seiko Lumibrite Luminova is known for being extremely long-lasting, and some of the best in the industry, despite the relatively modest price of this watch, of between £200 and £300, depending on where you look, and likely between 250 and 270. And the dimensions of this stainless steel case are 44.3mm by 48mm in terms of length. And this makes the watch remarkably wearable, actually, because despite its relatively large size, because of those extended sections of this style of widened case, the watch still is very short from extremity to extremity, which means that it can wear large if you want it to, but if you have a smaller wrist, it will sit very comfortably, and it won't hang over the edges like some watches do and catch on clothing. Additionally, the bezel adds a certain degree of height to this watch, making it 14mm high as a whole, but is easily gripped and provides high legibility due to the graduations going all the way around the bezel, as opposed to stopping after 15 minutes, which is often the case. And this watch is a proper ISO-rated diver, so it is resistant to temperatures in water, as well as magnetism, shocks, and even noise as well. These watches are tested to really ensure a security in terms of water resistance to those full 200 metres, which is something really brilliant and something that Seiko has become very known for really rigorously testing their dive watches to be truly professional instruments at any price range. And certainly this watch really does have a brilliant approach to having a timepiece which is designed purely for its function, where the bezel is highly legible, the dial and its luminescent material is very well considered, and even the Hardlex crystal on this watch seems like a reasonable option, bearing in mind the fact that it's much more shatter resistant than sapphire, which for the applications this watch is built for does make sense, despite the fact that as someone who doesn't like scratches, I can certainly understand sapphire being a real benefit on some of the more expensive Seikos. But nonetheless, you do still get that 4R36 movement with its hacking and hand winding functions, which will always make this watch a practical piece, and more practical than the SKX, for instance, while still retaining the versatility in terms of being able to have this watch in a great many colours, a myriad of different types and colours with different bezels, different dials, and even different colour handsets, which all adds to the appeal of this watch to the individual, and the fact that this does make a fantastic value piece for its price point. Now the next watch I'd like to talk about has a design which has fundamentally affected the watch world, especially over the last 20 years. And the reason for this is that this is a watch which was designed by Max Bill. And Max Bill is, or rather was, a very, very eminent designer. He was a Swiss gentleman who in fact studied at the Bauhaus school in the 1920s, and so as a result has this very particular minimalistic style of design, and went on to become an architect, artist, designer, and is also known for being a teacher and politician. And his work with Junghans in 1962 really led to a line of watches which have become an undisputed part of the Junghans line, and a contributor to the world of watches, because these set off in many ways the trend of having Bauhaus and minimalistic watches, with that very particular style of design which we now see in watches like Nomos. And so as a result, this watch is very important in my eyes in terms of leading the public interest in the direction of this style. And so as a result, I feel that one of these watches make an extremely good piece as far as affordable, iconic timepieces go. And the version of the watch I'd like to talk about today is the 34mm model, which is the manual wound model. And often people shy away from smaller sized watches such as 34mm, which is significantly below the average size of a watch, sort of a unisex watch at 38 or 39mm. But this is a watch which is designed to the same specifications and proportions, rather, as the original from the 1960s. And in many ways I think this is a very important thing, because it means you can wear a watch which wears like a timepiece from the original era of design of these watches, which I think is a very important and very interesting thing to have. And Junghans joins a very small group of brands who are willing to cater for this smaller market of watches. And certainly this is designed to be a formal dress watch, so size, even on a larger wrist, isn't really a problem if this watch appears small. And this watch comes in at 34mm, as I've said, by 9mm in thickness, making this a very, very slim watch, which is a really wonderful aspect of this timepiece, which is able to achieve this thin nature, despite a slightly domed crystal, due to the movement, which is an ETA 2801. And the ETA 2801 can be seen as the manually wound cousin of the ETA 2824 and 2836. Because this is a movement which is very easily serviced, has a 42-hour power reserve, and runs at 4 Hz with that smooth tick, or rather flow, of the second hand, which runs at 8 beats a second. Additionally, the watch does feature the use of hacking, which is another benefit, really, of these ETA movements, and the fact that they are so easily serviced. And the design of this watch really is the predominant feature about this, because Junghans are known for producing really very, very well-made timepieces, with an excellent quality of polishing on the watches, and the dials are beautifully finished in any of the colours offered, from silver to black to a grey, to more outlandish colours such as a baby blue or salmon in some cases. And this does present this watch as a piece which isn't limited as far as being a larger or smaller watch, but rather is a really beautiful unisex dress watch. And there are two fundamental dial designs with this watch, one having numerals, which is my personal favourite, as well as a model with a far more simple dial with simple indices, which gives a certain leeway with regards to choosing what you really want from this timepiece. And of course, bearing in mind the fact that these are very easily serviced and feature a sapphire crystal, a stainless steel case, and a beautifully made strap, as well as a fantastic case build, these really are watches that will last, which is great to see, and one can really see where Junghans has come from in terms of their reputation after handling one of these pieces. And as a final note on these watches, the detailing on these pieces really is phenomenal, with the dials being a metallic inlaid, whereby you have a sort of a sub-layer of metallic paint under the dial colour, which means that even on dials such as the grey models, you get a wonderful shine and lustre, which really is brilliant to see. Additionally, the caseback features Max Bill's signature, which is another interesting detail, and which I think really adds to the watch as a whole, whilst producing a timepiece which really will work as an enduring and very much timeless dress watch, from this really brilliant German brand. And of course the watch, apart from the movement, is made entirely in Germany, which again shows a certain brand integrity to their nation. And the second dress watch in this video, and in fact the last dress watch, all the other watches in this video are to be sports watches, is the Hamilton Ventura Automatic. And this is a watch which, for many years, I saw as one of the most brilliant designs from Hamilton, because it's just so unbelievably different. And this is a watch with its triangular case form and curious lines, which takes inspiration from their watch from the 1950s, which was in fact produced to house Hamilton and indeed the world's first electric movement. And this was a real milestone. Of course, the modern alternative is automatic, which I think in many people's eyes is more in keeping with public interest. But certainly this watch gained its reputation not just from being the first electric watch back in its day, but also from being seen on the wrist of Elvis Presley in the 1960s, which is certainly an aspect of this 1957 design, which has led to its popularity and an iconic nature as far as a piece which really celebrates the design of the 1950s, and the sheer wackiness of American design of that era. And of course I completely understand this watch isn't for everyone in terms of design, and certainly many will prefer having a more conventional timepiece. But for those who do choose to pursue this type of watch, the dimensions of this watch are very difficult to give, because of course the shape of this watch is so different to the conventional circular form which these measurements are built for. So it has a width from side to side, not including the crown, of 34mm, which seems very small for a watch of this wackiness and curiosity. But in truth, the length from extremity to extremity is significantly larger, extending well over the 40mm mark in terms of full length, which makes this watch altogether more sizable on the wrist, and far more wearable for more people. Of course, one does have to bear in mind the fact that this watch is a piece which was designed for that era, and so as a result the sizing won't come as a modern type, but nonetheless it does offer wearability for any sort of wrist. And the outward appearance of this watch is unique, with its fantastic triangular form, which is so typical of that era, and as well as those flanking sides, which reach out over the wrist and over the strap, which are unique and very, very different. And the dial is available in either silver or a sort of a browny charcoal sort of colour, depending on the light. And this allows the watch to take on two very different styles, depending on what particular style of watch you like. My personal favourite would be the silver, because in its sunburst form, it really does extend the silver metallic nature of this watch, and I think evokes the chrome bumpers and bare metal seen in the 1950s. And of course these watches feature a semi-skeletonization, with the movements visible through the front of the case, which is another interesting feature and does add to that mechanization which you see in the 1950s. And this is also visible through these specially adapted cuts in the case back, which only add to the form and the interest of this £760 watch. And for this watch, featured quite extensively in the Men in Black franchise, we also see a movement which is not terribly conventional and is something which is relatively new to the Swatch watch group. And this is the H10 caliber. And this is based on the ETA 2824, but features an 80-hour power reserve rather than the previous 42 hours, which means that you can put this watch down for more than 3 days and it'll remain running, which is something which is very different to a shorter span seen on these higher beat movements. And this does drop to 3 Hz, so that's 6 ticks a second, which means it does stutter a bit more, but with much shorter hands this is far less noticeable on this particular timepiece. And so for a Swiss-made watch of this type, with this complexity of case build, which is something to take into account because a case like this takes a lot of design work and is very different, and you really won't find anything else on the market, I think £760 for this timepiece, especially considering Hamilton's very rich history, and the general very high quality of their watches, having owned a couple, I can say this does offer a great deal of value for the price, and does offer something completely alien to the usual watch consumer. Now, when most watch collectors think of a £500 to £800 watch, which is a dive watch with a vintage-style case and design, often the Squale 50 Atmos comes up. However, there's a different watch on the market which is also very interesting, and in my eyes offers similarly fascinating history, with a closer design to that original piece. And this is the CWC Royal Navy Diver. And this is a piece which has interested me for a while, because it's produced by the same company that made the watch which, from the very early 1980s, supplied the Royal Navy as far as dive watches went. And this was the watch which replaced the Rolex Submariner in its military specification as the principal watch used by the Royal Navy. And in many ways this watch has barely changed since, in terms of design, albeit the movement has been updated to a modern ETA 2824. But the design of this watch has remained extremely similar, and it's still produced to military specification, which is something that very few brands can say they've been doing for so long. And as CWC have been used really very extensively by the British Armed Forces, both in the Royal Navy and also in terms of their G10 watches for infantry, they certainly do have an inherent connection with the armed forces, which makes these watches particularly different and stand out from the pack. And the watch is 41mm in diameter with a 40mm diameter at the bezel, which is this very thin 120 click bezel. And for the purposes of this video, I'm talking about the Mark II version of this watch with a sapphire crystal, slightly higher price than the Mark I model, as well as a 120 click bezel, and generally slightly higher features. And of course, it's worth also noting the fact that these watches are also Swiss-made, so despite the fact they're designed and built by an English company, they are in fact still Swiss-made timepieces. And of course, the design of these watches is so typically military, with the dial having this very bold and legible design with those hands which have to be different shapes to differentiate themselves, and which the MOD actually forced Rolex to do when they took on the Submariner, which does show the importance of this to them. And of course, this watch is a 300-metre diver, so it really is a professional dive watch, which is ISO certified as a result of having to be tested to be used by the armed forces. And of course, it is now using Luminova. It would previously have used tritium on the dial, but due to safety concerns with that, it now uses Luminova. Additionally, the bezel is again very legible. It's graduated the full way round, and the crown has full-size crown guards which protect the entire height of the crown, which is something rarely seen and I think is undervalued if you're going to use this watch as a rugged and robust model. And in terms of case features, these watches have a brushed and polished finish, which is simple and effective at doing what it needs to do in terms of making a watch which is both aesthetically pleasing as well as very resistant to the elements. And so as a result, this watch does look very conventional in terms of dive watches, but nonetheless really did set the mark as far as later military dive watches go, and has a direct heritage with regards to the design of the Rolex Milsub, as well as the Omega Seamaster 300 used prior to that, which in many ways set the specifications of this very watch. And so what this watch offers to the individual is the ability to wear a watch with direct heritage from the Omega Seamaster 300 from the 1960s, as well as the Rolex Milsub in terms of design, and the fact that this watch isn't an homage, but rather is built directly to military specification, and has remained pretty much unchanged since the early 1980s, which is something that few brands can say they've been able to do. And of course, in this Mark II specification, it does feature the sapphire crystal, as well as that 120 click bezel, which has been rethought, which I think is something which it did have to bring it into the modern day. But nonetheless, it is as close as you can get to a true military dive watch as you're going to find in terms of a vintage styled piece. Whereas a watch from, for example, Marathon is technologically on par with this watch, but doesn't have that heritage that this timepiece offers. And so as a result, I feel this watch offers a really brilliant package for its full price of £900. And the final watch I'd like to talk about is a fantastically made piece from Stowa. And this is the Classic 40. And the watch you see on the screen, though, is a timepiece from the 1940s. And that's because this was one of the brands, along with Larco, Elang & Sonner, as well as IWC, to produce pilot's watches for the Luftwaffe. And they were roped into this in 1935, really, when they signed an agreement with Goering to produce these watches for their air force. And so, as a result, under Nazi rule, produced these watches until the end of the war. And despite this rather dark history, these watches have been able to rise to fame simply because they've set the theme for the vast majority of pilots' watches after this point for subsequent designs, because they simply designed a watch which was so unbelievably legible and which was so easy to use that it stuck. And I've produced a whole video on this in the past, so I won't dwell on it too much. But there are two general styles of these watches, the A and the B styles of dials. And the A styles of dials were generally seen as pilots' watches, with the large luminescent blue hands, and this very simple arrangement of loomed graduations around the dial with the hours. Whereas the B style, which is often seen as the navigation watch for a navigator, features the 12-hour display in the middle of the dial, and then the minutes around the edge. And with the Classic 40, Stowa rekindled this design in a modern package, which nonetheless retains these iconic features. And this is a 40mm brushed stainless steel watch with impeccable quality for the price of €990. And the quality of this watch really is phenomenal. It's generally agreed that they make the best pilot's watches in terms of Flieger watches on the market due to this sheer quality. And the brushing on the watches is very, very well done, as well as these beautifully thermally blued hands, which are blued in a pan effectively, through the use of heat on steel, which is something which gives a very different look to a chemically blued hand, and is really timelessly beautiful. And these watches are available in a variety of different types, and really this customization has become a brilliant aspect of these watches, because you can ask them really to do a great many of different styles of things to your watch to make it individual. But certainly in terms of the basic design, you have a fantastic style of matte black dial with these luminescent elements on it in either the A or the B style. Additionally, the hands are sized to fit that particular type of dial, with the B hands being slightly shorter in the case of the hour hand to fit within that internal reading of 12 hours. And the movement of these watches is an ETA 2824 in the top grade, but this is fully decorated with decorated bridges and a completely custom rotor, which mimics the text on the back of the original watches, but whilst not remaining too true to those, to make a watch which is truly perfect for daily wear. Additionally, the crown is this fantastic onion style, which is brilliantly chosen because it means it's very easily manipulated and retains the design of the original pieces. And I say these watches feature an ETA 2824. However, for if for an added waiting time, if you ask them specifically, they will put an ETA 2801 in these watches, like that Junghans, to give them that manual wound aesthetic through the exhibition caseback, that sapphire crystal exhibition caseback, which allows a fantastic view of the movement in all its glory. And with the manually wound model, you get a greater involvement because you have to wind it every couple of mornings, which I think does add to the owner experience, and certainly is something that a lot of collectors enjoy. And of course the straps on these watches are also brilliantly chosen, with riveted sections on these leather straps, which are very reminiscent of the originals, as well as these keepers on the strap, as well as a metal keeper, which are all aspects which are reminiscent of the original straps, and allow you to wear this design icon, really, as far as a truly functional piece goes on your wrist, which is a far more reasonable size than the original 55mm in this 40mm size. And so as a package, I feel, for just under €1,000, this is a really brilliant watch from a fantastic brand who offer a really tremendous service to the individual. Anyway, I'll conclude this video here, but do please leave your comments down below as to what you think of these watches, and what you think of my choices, and if there's anything you would have included instead. So thank you very much for watching, and please do like, share and subscribe to help the channel, and to be able to enjoy more content here in future. So thank you very much for watching. This is Arm on the Watch Guy, over and out.